Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for your patience of sitting out here. Appreciate it. Please have a seat if you have one. Well, hello, Massachusetts. It's an honor to be with you, outstanding members of Congress today. Senator Ed Markey. Ed, there you go. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Congressman Auchinclaw, Sauce, where is she? There you go, Jake. Bill Keating, Congressman, and your great former members, and one of my dearest friends, John Kerry, is doing a great job leading our international special presidential envoy on climate, traveling the world and talking with an awful lot of people. He's talking into moving more than they've been doing. And another great Massachusetts native, Gina McCarthy. Gina, there she is. My national climate advisor is leading our climate efforts here at home. It's an honor to be joined by your neighbor from Rhode Island. He's not a bad guy at all. I live in his house, Sheldon Whitehouse, a great champion of the environment. He's been banging away at it. I come here today with a message. As president, I have a responsibility to act with urgency and resolve when our nation faces clear and present dangers. And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger. The health of our citizens and our communities is literally at stake. The UN's leading international climate scientists call the latest climate report nothing less than, quote, code red for humanity. Let me say it again. Code red for humanity. It's not a group of political officials, elected officials. These are the scientists. We see it here in America, in red states and blue states. Extreme weather events costing $145 billion. $145 billion in damages just last year. More powerful and destructive hurricanes and tornadoes. I've flown over the vast majority of them out west and down in Louisiana, all across America. It's amazing to see. Ravaging 100-year-old droughts occurring every few years instead of every 100 years. Wildfires out west that have burned and destroyed more than 5 million acres, everything in its path. That is more land than the entire state of New Jersey, from New York down to the tip of Delaware. It's amazing. 5 million acres. Our national security is at stake as well. Extreme weather is already damaging our military installations here in the States, and our economy is at risk, so we have to act. Extreme weather disrupts supply chains, causing delays and shortages for consumers and businesses. Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world. So my message today is this. Since Congress is not acting as it should, and these guys here are, but we're not getting many Republican votes, this is an emergency, and I will look at it that way. I said last week, and I'll say it again loud and clear. As president, I'll use my executive powers to combat the climate crisis in the absence of congressional action, notwithstanding their incredible action. In the coming days, my administration will announce the executive actions we have developed to combat this emergency. We need to act. Just take a look around. Right now, 100 million Americans are under heat alert. 100 million Americans. 90 communities across America set records for high temperatures just this year, including here in New England as we speak. And by the way, records have been set in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Temperatures that are just unbelievable, melting the permafrost. It's astounding the damage that's being done. And this crisis impacts every aspect of our everyday life. That's why today I'm making the largest investment ever, $2.3 billion, to help communities across the country build infrastructure that's designed to withstand the full range of disasters we've been seeing up to today. Extreme heat, drought, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes. Right now, there are millions of people suffering from extreme heat at home. So my team is also working with the states to deploy $385 million right now. For the first time, states will be able to use federal funds to pay for air conditioners in homes, set up community cooling centers in schools where people can get through these extreme heat crises. And I mean people and crises are 100 to 117 degrees. An infrastructure law that your members of Congress have delivered includes $3.1 billion to weatherize homes and make them more energy efficient, which will lower energy costs while keeping America cool in the summer and warm in the winter and not using too much energy. And my Department of Labor, led by a guy named Marty Walsh, he talks funny, he's a hell of a guy. But all kidding aside, Marty was a great mayor, and I know he knows how to get a job done. And he's doing two things for me. First of all, as Secretary of Labor, he's developing the first ever workplace standards for extreme heat, saying under these conditions that hit this, you cannot do the following. You cannot ask people to do certain things. Second, he's sending folks out from the Labor Department to make sure we hold workplaces and to those standards that are being set. They've already completed over 500 heat-related inspections of workplaces across 43 states. At the end of the day, it's going to save lives. Now, let me tell you why we're here at Brayton Point. 5 years ago, this towering power plant that once stood with cooling towers 500 feet high closed down. A coal plant at Brayton Point was the largest of its kind in New England. 1,500 megawatts of power, enough to power 1 in 5 Massachusetts homes and businesses. For over 50 years, this plant supported this region's economy through the electricity they supplied, the good jobs they provided, and the local taxes they paid. But the plant, like many others around the country, had another legacy, one of toxins, smog, greenhouse gas emissions, the kind of pollution that contributed to the climate emergency we now face today. Gina McCarthy, a former regulator in Massachusetts, was telling me on the way up how folks used to get a rag out and wipe the gunk off of their car's windshields in the morning just to be able to drive. Not very much unlike where I grew up in a place called Claymont, Delaware, which has more oil refineries than Houston, Texas had in its region just across the line in Pennsylvania. And all the prevailing winds were our way. I just lived up the road. In an apartment complex when we moved to Delaware, and just up the road to a little school I went to, Holy Rosary Grade School. And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening. You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer, and why for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation. But that's the past. And we're going to build a different future. With one with clean energy, good paying jobs. Just 15 years ago, America generated more than half its electricity from coal-fired plants. Today, that's down to 20% because there's a big transition happening. Many of these fossil fuel plants are becoming sites for new clean energy construction. Others are switching to new clean technologies. Look at Brayton Point. Today, Brayton is on the frontier of clean energy in America. On this site, they'll manufacture 248 miles of high-tech, heavy-duty cables. Those specialized subsea cables are necessary to tie offshore wind farms to the existing grid. Manufacturing these cables will mean good-paying jobs for 250 workers, as many workers as the old power plant had at its peak. And the port here, 34 feet deep, was used to carry coal into the power plant. Now we're going to use that same port to carry components for wind power into the sea. The converter station here and the substation nearby are the assets that move energy across the power lines. They'll now move clean electricity generated offshore by the wind. Enough power to power hundreds of thousands of homes onto the grid, putting old assets to work, delivering clean energy. This didn't happen by accident. It happened because we believed and invested in America's innovation and ingenuity. One of the companies investing in the factory here joined me at the White House this month, Vineyard Winds, whose CEO told me about the groundbreaking project labor agreements they've negotiated with create good-paying union jobs. And I want to compliment Congressman Bill Keating for his work in this area. I'm also proud to point out that my administration approved the first commercial project for offshore wind in America, which is being constructed by Vineyard Winds. Folks, elsewhere in the country, we are propelling retrofits and ensuring that even where fossil fuel plants retires, they still have a role in powering the future. In Illinois, for example, the state has launched a broad effort to invest in converting old power plants to solar farms, led by Governor Pritzker. In California, the IBEW members have helped turn a former oil plant into the world's largest battery storage facility, the world's largest facility. In Wyoming, innovators are chosen to a retiring plant as the next site for the next generation nuclear plant. And my administration is a partner in that progress, driving federal resources and funding to the communities that have powered this country for generations. And that's why they need to be taken care of as well. I want to thank Cecil Roberts, a friend and president of United Mine Workers of America, and so many other labor leaders who work with on these initiatives. Since I took office, we've invested more than $4 billion in federal funding to 25 hardest hit coal communities in the country, from West Virginia to Kentucky to Wyoming to New Mexico. Through the infrastructure law, we're investing in clean hydrogen, nuclear, and carbon capture for the largest grid investments in American history. We've secured $16 billion to clean up abandoned mines and wells, protecting thousands of communities from toxins and waste, particularly methane. And we're going to seal leaking methane pollution, an incredibly powerful greenhouse gas that's 40 times more dangerous to the environment than carbon dioxide. And folks, with American leadership back on climate, I was able to bring more world leaders together. We got 100 nations together to agree that the major conference in Glasgow, England, Scotland, to change the emissions policies we have. We've made real progress, but there's an enormous task ahead. We have to keep retaining and recruiting building trades and union electricians for jobs in wind, solar, hydrogen, and nuclear, creating even more and better jobs. We have to revitalize communities, especially those fence-line communities that are smothered by the legacy of pollution. We have to outcompete China and in the world and make these technologies here in the United States, not have to import them. Folks, when I think about climate change, and I've been saying this for 3 years, I think jobs. Climate change, I think jobs. Almost 100 wind turbines going up off the coast of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, with ground broken and work underway. Jobs manufacturing 2,500 ton steel foundations that anchor these offshore wind farms to the sea floor. Jobs manufacturing a Jones Act vessel in Texas to service these offshore wind farms. We're going to make sure that the ocean is open for the clean energy of our future, and everything we can do, give a green light to wind power on the Atlantic coast where my predecessors' actions only created confusion. And today, we began the process to develop wind power in the Gulf of Mexico as well for the first time. A real opportunity to power millions of additional homes from wind. Let's clear the way. Let's clear the way for clean energy and connect these projects to the grid. I've directed my administration to clear every federal hurdle and streamline federal permitting that brings these clean energy projects online right now and right away. And some of you have already come up and talked to me about that. And while so many governors and mayors have been strong partners in this fight to tackle climate change, we need all governors and mayors. We need public utility commissioners and state agency heads. We need electric utilities and developers to stand up and be part of the solution. Don't be a roadblock. You all have a duty right now to our economy, to our competitiveness in the world, to the young people in this nation, and to future generations. That sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. It's real. To act boldly on climate. And so does Congress, which, notwithstanding the leadership of the men and women that are here today, has failed in its duty. Not a single Republican in Congress stepped up to support my climate plan. Not one. So let me be clear. Climate change is an emergency. And in the coming weeks, I'm going to use the power I have as president to turn these words into formal, official government actions through the appropriate proclamations, executive orders, and regulatory power that a president possesses. And when it comes to fighting for climate change, I will not take no for an answer. I will do everything in my power to clean our air and water, protect our people's health, to win the clean energy future. This, again, sounds like hyperbole. Our children and grandchildren are counting on us. Not a joke. Not a joke. If we don't keep it below 1.5 degrees centigrade, we lose it all. We don't get to turn it around. And the world is counting on us. This is the United States of America. When we put our hearts and minds to it, there's not a single thing beyond our capacity. I mean it. When we act together, and of all things we should be acting together on, it's climate. It's climate. And by the way, my dear mother, God rest her soul, used to say, Joey, out of everything bad, something good will come if you look hard enough. Look what's happening. We're going to be able to create as many or more good-paying jobs. We're going to make environments where people live safer. We're going to make the air safer. I really mean it. We have an opportunity here. I'll bet you when you see what's happened here in this cable construction here, manufacturing, and you go back and ask all the people who grew up in this beautiful place what they'd rather have. They want the plant back with everything it had, or what you're going to have. I will be dumbfounded if you find anybody other than for pure sentimental reasons saying, I'd rather have a coal plant. I'll end by telling you another quick story. When we moved from Scranton, when coal died in Scranton, everything died in Scranton. And my dad wasn't a coal miner. My great-grandfather was a mining engineer. But my dad was in sales, and there was no work. So we left to go down to Delaware. I told you where those oil plants were. But I remember driving home when you take the trolley in Scranton, going out North Washington and Adams Avenues. Within 15 blocks, we didn't live in the neighborhood, the most prestigious neighborhood in the region, in the town where the Scrantons and other good, decent people live. There was you'd go by a wall that my recollection was somewhere between 15 and 18 feet tall. And it went for essentially a city block. And you could see the coal piled up to the very top of the wall from inside. It was a coal-fired plant. A coal-fired plant. And all of that, all of the negative impacts of breathing that coal, the dust, were affecting everybody. But at the time, people didn't know it, and there wasn't any alternative. Folks, we have no excuse now. We know it. There are answers for it. We can make things better in terms of jobs. We can make things better in terms of the environment. We can make things better for families overall. So I'm looking forward to this movement. Thank you, thank you, thank you. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Do in every stage in this historic and unique economic recovery is to effectively communicate to the American people where we are, to give it to people straight, but also to lay out clearly his plans, his priorities in terms of what he wants to see done. And so we are now moving into a phase which is really a transition, that transition that he spoke about. And so what he has been doing for the last couple of weeks, what he will continue to do is try to help make sure that we're communicating clearly to the American people what that means and also what his plans are and also that he is prepared to work with anybody, Democrat and Republican, to try to make progress on that, but also highlight that there are differences between his approach and others, and that's important for the American people to understand as well.
What is the expectation today as you advise the president, or his expectation about how long prices will be at these high levels, 40-year levels, how long inflation will be here?
Well, you know, there is uncertainty, and I will leave the predictions to forecasters. I think you and others have seen most major forecasters out there and their projections, most projecting that we will see moderation in inflation over the course of the year. What I can say and is important with respect to, for example, the op-ed that the president wrote today, is that the president has a clear approach and priorities with respect to tackling inflation. And the more progress that we can make on that plan, the more progress that we can make in lowering costs and making things more affordable for families right now, the more progress we can make in building on the historic deficit reduction we've already seen this year, then the better off we'll be, the better positioned we'll be to actually see that moderation happen more quickly. So that's our focus. Our focus when we're thinking about policy, particularly fiscal policy, is how can we make more progress on that front, understanding that, you know, there are a lot of predictions out there.
Just a couple more, Josh.
Thanks, Brian. Chair Powell has said there are limited tools that the Fed has to deal with supply shocks, like what we saw from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the lockdowns in China over the coronavirus. Given that limitation, do you believe the U.S. is well insulated and protected against future supply shocks that could cause prices to rise, as we've seen with gasoline? Or do you think additional action is needed with Congress in order to provide that protection?
Well, I would say a couple things. The first point that I made and underscored is we do face serious global challenges right now. And the supply chain disruptions, the ongoing supply chain disruptions emanating from COVID and China most recently are significant. Likewise, the implications on the energy market of Russia's invasion of Ukraine are significant and ongoing. And so absolutely, those are significant global challenges. They are affecting energy prices and food prices globally. They're affecting supply chain distribution systems globally. That is point one. Point two is we in the United States are better positioned to actually navigate through those challenges than almost any other country, in part because of as I've said already, the strength of our economic recovery, in part also because of the work that we have done, for example, on the supply chain side over the last 9 months of consistent, focused effort working with all different parts of our supply chain. We now see, for example, the fluidity, what's known as, how fast containers can move through ports, for example, and get from a ship all the way to the end, that we have seen significant improvements in that fluidity across time, which puts us in a better position to navigate potential new supply shocks, but they pose ongoing challenges. Third, there are places where we could absolutely use Congress's help, and we could use it urgently. And so when you think about some of the core challenges we have with respect to supply chains, they circle back to the issue of semiconductors. And we remain extremely vulnerable to the supply chain fragilities associated with semiconductors. Notwithstanding everything we have been through in this pandemic crisis, we still don't have a dedicated supply chain office within the federal government that is funded adequately to actually take on, map, and aggressively go at these challenges. Now, we've made historic progress notwithstanding that, but we could use Congress moving to provide the resources and the funding and the authorities that are in the bipartisan innovation bill that is now in conference. So that's one place where we are hopeful, working very closely with Congress in an effort to try to get that done, and that would give us more tools to keep building our resilience to these types of global shocks.
Josh, Catherine, and then okay.
Thank you. Since you were in the meeting, can you say whether the president expressed any view about what the Fed's path is right now? Chair Powell has talked about 50 basis points each in the next 2 meetings. Did President Biden weigh in at all on whether he thinks the Fed needs to go faster, slower, just about right at all in the meeting?
So I'm not going to read out any specific components of the meeting other than to underscore that the president did in private, as he did in public, underscore that his commitment to giving the Fed the space to conduct monetary policy independently without political interference.
Do you think that the Fed has moved too slowly by saying it's their responsibility? The implication, of course, is that they're holding the bag for the fact that inflation is at the highs that it is at.
I think by saying it's their responsibility, what the president is doing is acknowledging and underscoring the pivotal role that the Fed plays institutionally, and that monetary policy plays in the process of bringing prices down. That's a core mandate that the Fed has, and that he not only respects, but is willing to underwrite that independence matters, and being insulated from political interference matters. That's not an approach that the previous president took to this issue. It has not been an approach that presidents in the past have taken, and this president has underscored and is underscoring that he will do that. And I think that that's what you should take away from his acknowledgement of the responsibility that the Fed has.
And the tariff reviews come up at all, or can you give us the latest on that? The recalls, of course, that easing tariffs on imports from particular countries could be one measure that would cool inflation here in the U.S.
I know it's an issue of discussion. I don't have any update to share today.
Just following up on Josh's question on tariffs, is there any timing you can give us on a decision specifically on China tariffs?
Nothing specific on tariffs today.
I wanted to ask you about budget reconciliation.
About the what?
Budget reconciliation. What do you view as the right revenue to spending ratio to combat inflation?
Well, I think what the president has said and is underscoring today is that we have a real opportunity to lower costs and lower the deficit. And that we can actually do those two things together in a way that will create a more competitive economic environment, and actually increase incentives for businesses to invest in the United States by pairing tax reform with measures to lower costs for families. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of the conversations around reconciliation, other than to say the president really does believe that the right approach here is to focus on measures that would lower costs and help to make things more affordable right now for families, and to lower the deficit. And that he believes that that's the right way to address inflation, and that that's probably the most significant thing that Congress could do right now to actually help to accelerate the process of bringing prices down, to Kelly's point.
About a year ago, you stood here at the podium along with other officials talking about inflation as transitory. Now a lot of the focus from the White House and the broader administration is on messaging, as Caitlin and Kelly pointed out earlier. Was it a mistake to use that phrasing, and do you think it gave Americans a false sense of how long these rising prices would be here for?
Look, I think that this has been an uncertain and unexpected and recovery period, historic in many ways. And so I think that our focus right now is on what is the right policy to bring prices down without sacrificing all of the economic gains that we have made. And I think that one thing that is unambiguously the case is that over the course of this 15 months, the strength of this recovery that we have had in the United States has not only helped millions of people and millions of families across the country, but now positions us well to address what is a global issue. And when you look out across the world right now, there's also no question that inflation is a global challenge. The 8.1% figure that I cited for the euro area, if you look back over the last 6 months, headline euro area inflation is 9%. And that is because we know that principally the drivers of that are the convulsions and the convulsive impact of having to shut the economy down and restart the economy, and compounded now by the supply effects that Josh asked about with respect to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So that's our focus. That's where we're focused now. And we think that the policy choices that we make here going forward will be consequential in how quickly and effectively we can navigate through this next period.
But that talks mostly about the structural factors. I guess when you talk to Americans, when you look at polling, they say their biggest concern is rising prices, which I think part of that stems from the prolonged period that we've been in. And so I'm wondering, as you focus on the messaging, have you learned lessons from that, where you discussed it as transitory, and now, 15 months later, we're still here?
Look, I think that what the president has done with respect to communications has been to consistently explain to the American people where we are and where we need to go, and that continues to be the way that he approaches this issue, and very much from the perspective of what it feels like to sit around a dining room table or a kitchen table in this country, because that's his lived experience, and that's the way that he approaches these economic policy questions. And so he understands that right now the top issue on people's minds is prices at the gas station, prices at the grocery store, and he's made very clear, and he's communicating very clearly that that's his top economic priority, and that we can address this from a position of strength, and that we can make this transition to stable growth without sacrificing all of those gains if we make the right decisions going forward. And so that's what he will continue to do. It's certainly what we'll continue to do in serving him.
Brian, if I could quickly follow up. If the president is communicating effectively, how do you explain and make sense of his low poll numbers?
Look, I will just say this, that the president always tasks us to focus on what are the right policy decisions and the right policy choices to try to advance an economy that has been his animating feature of what he wants to get done for years, which is how do you build an economy from the bottom up, the middle out, where working families have more opportunities. We've made historic progress in that direction. We have made historic progress in that direction because of some of the hard and difficult policy choices that this president has made. But we now have to address this issue of rising prices. The president has been focused on that for some time. We need some help in working with Congress on some of the issues that we just discussed. And I think that, if we can deliver, I think what the American people are mostly want to see is that we can actually move the ball forward, and that we can actually make some progress in things that matter in their daily lives. And it's why you've seen the president so focused on things like reducing the cost of internet, building more affordable housing to reduce the cost of housing, because we get that those are practical things that are impacting people in their lives. And the more progress we can make on that front, that's what people want to see. That's what people want to see is progress, and so that's where we're going to keep our focus.
Why is the president so hesitant to face us from behind the podium, just like you did?
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Brian. Come back soon. All right, that's all I have on for the topper. Oh, we could no. Go ahead, Josh. Why don't you kick us off here?
Great. Thanks. 1 sec. Two subjects. First, could you offer some clarity on what President Biden meant when he said we're not sending Ukraine rocket systems that could strike into Russia, since even short-range missiles could fly over the border if they're fired nearby? And is the White House concerned that sending a rocket system could be considered escalatory?
So let me first say that those systems continue to be under consideration, so I don't have anything to preview on anything specific there. But as the president said, we won't be sending long-range rockets for use beyond the battlefield in Ukraine. But right now, I don't have anything to preview for you today.
Secondly, could you update us on the status of where Mexico's president stands on going to the Summit of Americas? It's the first time we've hosted since 1994, and what does this controversy say about the U.S. relationship with Mexico?
So, I don't have anything to share or anything to confirm about anyone's attendance. We don't have a final list. Once we have a final list, we'll be sharing that. Look, the president is looking forward to hosting, as you just said, the first one in a long time. It's the 9th Summit of the Americas in June, just a few days away, and values the opportunity for leader-to-leader, civil society and private sector engagement to advance our goals and find common ground. He views the summit as an important opportunity for leaders and key stakeholders to come together to address the core challenges facing the people of the hemisphere. No other part of the world impacts the security and prosperity of the United States more directly than the Western Hemisphere, and we are joined not just by geography, but also by economic ties, democratic principles, cultural connections, and familial bonds. I don't have a list to confirm or any invites or decisions that's been made. That's up to clearly the individual leaders.
Hello.
Hello.
Happy Tuesday.
I feel like it's been a long time.
Just to follow up on that, has everyone who's going to be invited to the summit been invited?
We're still working through some of the invites. We just don't have a final list. And we have said, once we have a final list, we'll share that.
Can you elaborate on the President's promise earlier today to meet with lawmakers on new gun laws, when or how that would happen, and whether there are any preconditions on when or how he'd meet with them?
So the president look, he's been calling for action for some time. What we have seen, in particular these past 2 weeks, with these mass shootings in Buffalo, and we saw the president go to Buffalo and grieve with the family there. We saw the president and the First Lady just this past Sunday go to Texas to grieve with the parents there. And it is heart-wrenching what we're experiencing. This is an epidemic, the gun violence that we're seeing across the country, and we have to do something, and we have to continue to make efforts to act, to protect our kids, to protect people going to the grocery store. The president has made this one of his priorities from the first day that he walked into this administration, and now he's calling on Congress to act. And so he is hopeful. He wants to make sure there's action. The White House, we have our White House team that is in constant communication with Congress on an array of issues, including this one, because again, this is a priority, and he wants to continue to make sure that he continues to voice his concern and what needs to be done next. Look, the president has done everything that he can from the federal government. We are looking at other executive actions that we can possibly do. This president has done more executive actions at this point than any other president, but it's not up to him alone. He cannot do this alone. This is what you heard him say to Kelly O yesterday. And so Congress needs to act so we can have federal law legislation on the books so we can stop this epidemic that we're seeing across the country.
What other executive actions would be under consideration if you just said he's done everything he can do?
Well, we're looking to see what else can be done, to be clear. We have done, as you've heard us say, we have done the ghost guns. The stemming of the flow of ghost guns is something that the president has done through executive action. If you look at ghost guns, they are not regulated. There's no serial number connected to them. They are the weapons of choice when it comes to terrorists and criminals. This is something that we have seen more and more pop up across the country, and so he put out an executive order through the Department of Justice to make sure that we do everything to stem ghost guns being out there. He's taken more efforts to take on gun traffickers and make sure that they are held accountable. He used the American Rescue Plan, which, by the way, no Republican voted for, to make sure that we put police officers back in the streets, who many of them lost their jobs during the COVID pandemic. And so there's $10 billion that we announced that cities have used to make sure that they are using that funding, or said they have used that funding for gun violence. These are the actions that this president has taken. And now he's calling on Congress to take action. He's calling on Congress to take a vote so that we can protect families and communities.
He said, no, nothing's scheduled yet.
I don't have anything more to preview. He said yesterday himself that they are looking at other options on executive actions. But again, he's done more than any president at this time.
One other thing I wanted to just clarify from something he said on Friday during his address at the Naval Academy. The president was born in 1942, graduated from the University of Delaware in 1965. In his address, he said he was appointed to the Naval Academy in 1965. Was he? Was it in 1965?
So I did not hear that part of the speech, so I would have to. Okay, I did. I missed.
A lot of writing about it.
No, I hear you, Ed. I hear you. I have not. I need to read it myself and just go back and see what you're talking about exactly. I can't speak to it right now. Okay.
Thank you, Corinne. Canada is making it impossible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in that country. Would President Biden ever consider a similar restriction on handguns here?
So, we'll leave it up to other countries to set their policy on gun ownership. The president has made his position clear. The United States needs to act, as I just laid out. He supports a ban on sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines and expanded background checks to keep guns out of the dangerous hands. He does not support a ban on the sale of all handguns, to answer your question.
Okay, thank you. In some places in this country now, a gallon of gas costs more than people on the federal minimum wage are making in an hour. What does the White House want these people to do? Just stop driving to work?
Look, the president understands what it feels like. Deese just spoke about this. Brian Deese was just here and talked about how he understands what it means for people who are sitting at their kitchen table and see gas prices go up. He understands that feeling personally, or seeing prices of groceries go up in the grocery store. This is something that he is inherently aware of, and he's doing everything that he can. As Brian Deese was just here, his economic advisor, one of his top economic advisor, laying out what he is planning to do or continue to do to make sure that we lower costs at the gas pump. Brian also said that we are dealing with an unprecedented time with global challenges that we have never seen before. And that includes clearly the pandemic, that includes Putin's tax hike that we're seeing this past couple of months, that has had an effect on gasoline prices. $1.50 went up since Putin has amassed his troops on the border of Ukraine. These are real, global issues that has led to this moment. But the president is doing everything that he can to make sure that we address this issue.
And you just mentioned Putin a few times
Yep.
as a reason for recent inflation. Do you guys think that any part of inflation this year is because of President Biden's spending plans, or is it all Putin's fault?
Well, what I can say is we are, and Brian just spoke to this, we are at a historic place when it comes to the economy, when it comes to unemployment being at the lowest that we have seen in some time, when it comes to the president creating more jobs in his first term, his first year, than any other president, more than 8.5 million jobs. Now we're going to a place where we're going into transition, where we're going to see an economy that's more stable, that's more steady. So that's because of the American Rescue Plan that the president signed into law, that no Republican signed or voted for, I should say. And all of that work that he's done the first year has led us to a place where there are more jobs out there, more jobs are being created, that we are in a place where we're seeing economic growth. Now, and also, as I've stated, this is an unprecedented time with COVID. This is an unprecedented time with the war. And so that Putin has created and started on Ukraine. And so we have seen, data has shown us, since these past couple of months, since the war, we have seen an uptick on gas prices.
So I guess the next question would be, does President Biden take any responsibility for his policies potentially contributing to inflation?
His policies has helped the economy get back on its feet. That's what his policies has done. When we talk about the gas prices right now, this is indeed Putin's gas hike. This is what we have seen in the most recent months of what we've seen at the gas pump. And so that is a fact. We have seen about 60% increase in the past several months, and because of the amassing and his invasion of Ukraine. And so the president, his goal right now, and what he is